Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Friday to you, TGIF. It's beautiful to be alive and great to be with you again. I'm Nate the Barbarian. Welcome back to Hot Mic. Welcome back to Hot Mic. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not alone, joined by Phil Heimlich. How you doing, Phil?
I'm very good. And by the way, Kevin, I just want you to know all that stuff about that language you used. We put that behind us. So, I don't. You don't need to feel any guilt about that. Just want you to know.
Yeah, he did get he was a little different. He was a little
I
different.
heard that some members of his congregation were kind of pulling up James 5:12, not to throw a lot of scripture. I believe it says, "Do not swear by anything on earth." But hey, Kevin, we all have our moments. You know what I mean? So we're all about forgiveness here on this show. Just so you know
Hey,
that.
hey, listen, I never claimed to be perfect. There's only one perfect person that ever walked the face of this
Oh,
earth, and I've never claimed to be him. Just aspire to be more like him. So
There it is. There it is. Well,
says it
listen,
all.
says it all. Listen, everybody, thank you so much for being here. You got the three amigos today, and we want to hit some hot topics, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's nothing hotter right now than what's going on between our dear president, Donald Trump, and his number one donor, Elon Musk. I mean, they have been going at it. Apparently, Elon was really upset about this so-called big, beautiful bill. He said a lot of things that Democrats said that it's going to be disastrous, and that the tax cuts for the very rich should be taken out. And I mean, Elon has been going in. There's been a lot's been said. I've got a lot of screenshots I'll share with you, but I know you guys have been paying attention, maybe more to some degree than the average folks out there. I just want to get your thoughts. I mean, did you expect this? Did you expect it this soon? Are there any real life ramifications for us, for the American citizens that maybe had crossed your mind? But what do you think about Elon? What do you think about the most powerful man in the world versus the richest man in the world?
yeah, I think it's not surprised that it happened. I'm actually surprised it lasted this long. I mean, when you've got two personality types like Elon Musk and Trump, particularly with Trump not really liking to or wanting to share the spotlight with anybody. I think this clash of personalities was always inevitable. I think it was a convenient marriage there for a while. I think, as Elon Musk said it, Trump wouldn't have been elected if it hadn't been for him. Facts. And Elon Musk wouldn't have been able to get access to all of our data so that he can then feed it into his AI without Trump putting him in charge of Doge. So it was a mutually beneficial thing that was always destined to erupt, and now we're starting to see, how the real feelings are. When things come out. I don't know that these two beefing is going to have any real impact in general on the average American. I mean, I think the crux of what they are sort of falling out over this big beautiful budget bill is probably what's really going to affect people more than these two being catty on social media against each other. And I think that's where all Americans' concerns should be at. But it's definitely a popcorn moment. I mean, I've enjoyed sitting back watching these two, go at each other, and Trump in his standard fashion. If you go against him, if you say anything against him, he's gonna come after you, and he's gonna use whatever tools that he has at his disposal to get at you. I mean, he's threatening Elon's governmental contracts, and that's what Trump does. And that's the thing that always never ceases to amaze me about folks who choose to hitch their wagon to Donald Trump is eventually he's going to turn around and he's going to cut your throat and stab you in the back at the first opportunity that you're not kissing his butt. And Elon Musk may find that out here very shortly.
What's your take, Phil?
There's a lot of verses in the, not to get biblical here, but there's a lot of verses in the Bible describing what a fool is. Okay, and a fool is someone who is arrogant, who boasts, who brags. Um, and there's a story that Jesus told about some guy who all he cared about was building bigger and bigger barns. And when he had money, that's all he wanted to do is make more money. And it says that God said to him, "You fool, tonight It's all going to be taken away from you. Everything's going to be taken away. And I think these two guys, regardless of what's just happened now, meet the definition of fools. I don't care how much money they have, they are foolish, foolish people. And I might have talked about before about Brian Tome, was a pastor at Crossroads where I go. He has a book called The Five Marks of a Man that I'm actually doing it with my son, and I recommend it. He says in there that he says, I have known 15-year-old men and 50-year-old boys. And you just got to read these tweets from these two. And if you didn't know before, these are two boys. These are not men, regardless of their position or their money. I mean, they're like a bunch of school kids. You would think one of them would realize this guy's acting like a fool, but I'm not going to act like one. But no, they're two they're two children, two boys is what they are. And and actually, I think, Nathan, you might have said, actually what Musk is saying about the bill is 100% right. It is massively, massively increasing the debt. But in either case, if nothing else, I think this has exposed both of them to be as the fools they are to the entire
Yeah, I'm
country.
with you on that. I agree. I think this whole situation, even this so-called big beautiful bill, which on one hand I think what a stupid name. But on the other thing, I think on the other hand, I think human beings are very busy. We live in a world where everybody's scrolling. Our attention span is about 2.5 seconds. So coming up with a name like that, hey, it might stick. It might stick. But through this, it is exposed. And back to your point, just how childish the president of the United States is. But we already knew this. And so I'm looking at this thinking, like, who would have ever voted for this? Like, I didn't need this scenario to know that Donald Trump acts like a child. I already knew that. Right. And I'm looking at this like, who would ever feel good about their vote? And you're watching the president act like a child on social media. It just blows my mind. But Musk said a lot of things, and Musk needs to be called out because what he's going to try to do, and he said this, is that he said, "Well, I think I might try to support some Democrats in the upcoming elections." I'm like, okay, so he's trying to play both sides of it. When Democrats are in power, he plays that side. When Republicans are in power, he plays that side. Some will say it's smart. I get it. I think that do you think they're gonna make up, or has too much been said? We've gone too far.
No, I think look, the Black Eagle, Joe Madison, God rest his soul, used to have a saying that there are no such thing as permanent friends or permanent enemies, only permanent interests. And to your point about, Elon Musk um switching to the Democrats or whatever, this is what people who are in it for themselves do. They will support, they will put their money around whatever best serves their interests or needs at the time. And that's what the mistake that people make is believing that these guys are ideologues. They're not. They're opportunists. They're con artists. They're selfish individuals that will do whatever they need to do, say whatever they need to say, side with whatever side they need to be on to further their interests. And it's no more deeper than that for Elon Musk. And I think that has too much been said. No. I mean, I think that when you look at these two guys, if the right set of circumstances come back around, they'll forget all of that if it serves their greater needs or their greater interests. See, people like that can put stuff aside for their own selfish interest. They won't allow, I mean, Trump does to a certain degree, but at a certain point, they'll set ego aside if it means more money in their pocketbooks, more power and influence. They'll do that. So I'm not going to say this is the end of Elon Musk and Donald Trump. It may be for the time being, but we'll see what happens down the road. The other thing I'll say really quickly, you guys talked about both of these men behaving like children. I'm gonna give a shout out to my guy, the Reverend Charlie Winburn. He talks about early childhood trauma a lot, and how some people who have traumatized childhoods, never grow out of that. And a lot of the things that you see, a lot of the dysfunction that you see them exhibit in adulthood is a matter of unresolved childhood trauma. And I think for both of these men, no matter how much money they have, you can look at them and you can see the father that Trump grew up with, how he was treated in that family and dealt with. Everything you see from him is a byproduct of that. And I think you can probably say the same thing about Elon Musk.
Yeah, certainly on Trump. Yeah, but we never do that. Like with black people, let me make it racial here for a second. I see the media and the narrative going to what happened to the family, what went wrong with the family when somebody is black. We never asked that question of Donald Trump, but he clearly was traumatized by his mom and mom and his father, and it's well documented. It's well documented. So you're right on point. You know, Kevin. This is a grown man who was traumatized. But we already knew this, and this is why I didn't vote for him. We already saw this. This I just don't understand how people forgot how terrible the first time was. It was terrible because this man acts like a child and he makes everything about him. Him all the time instead of trying to do the best job for the American people. And I don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican. Makes no difference. I mean, you're supposed to be there to represent us. Take your ego and your childhood issues to the side. But people voted for this fool again. And so now this is where we are. We could have had Kamala Harris. We could be having a conversation about how these various companies are price gouging us and coming up with some viable solutions to kitchen table issues. But no, couldn't vote for the black woman. We had to vote for this fool. And this is what we got. Two grown, wealthy men arguing on Twitter. I mean, it's sad. We deserve
Well,
so much better as a country.
yeah, well, I think one of the things that, and I'm not going to say every, because we understand people voted for different reasons. Some of the motivations we'll never fully 100% know. But if you're one of those people who believe that Trump got reelected because of his views on the economy, or that he would handle the economy better, I think people are starting to see how bad of a bet that actually was. And it's like, people have short-term memories. Like, they like to go back and they say, oh, well, before COVID, the economy was humming along, and if COVID hadn't happened, Donald Trump would have probably gotten reelected because the economy was doing so good, perceived. Like, that's what I hear a lot of people say, to support their belief that Trump was going to be better on the economy. But if you look at it, he has not made the economy better. One of the things that drives the economy is consumer spending. And if you look at what he's done with the tariffs, that's driven down consumer spending. Prices are going up. People aren't spending as much. They're holding on to their dollars, or they're making different choices because prices on things are going up. He hasn't brought down prices. Um, and when you look at him adding to the national debt for all of those people who stood on chairs, all of those conservatives who stood on chairs and talked about our national debt, and that's a number one priority, is cutting spending. Here you've got a guy who's exploding the national debt, who's going to add $3 to $5 trillion onto the national debt. And essentially, if you're one of those people who want to believe the partially fictitious numbers that Doge wants to put out about how much they've actually saved, right? If you want to believe that, everything that Trump is pushing for in this bill is going to absolutely erase that. And Elon Musk himself has said that. So I just don't see how any conservative right now who voted for Trump on the economy can look at any of the things that he's doing, whether it's with regard to tariffs, threatening to cut Medicaid, or push forward this big, beautiful bill that's going to explode the national debt. He has done nothing that you've elected him to do to improve the economy.
Well, I would say that there's a lot of what I call fiscal phonies or fake conservatives out there, because it used to be that if you were conservative, you believed in balanced budgets. You believed that you don't spend more than you take in. But unfortunately, going back to Reagan and that supply side economics, which was totally false, had no, it never works. Unfortunately, conservatives today, most of them say, they're so-called conservatives, they say, "Oh, just cut taxes. It'll bring in money. But you cut taxes, we'll have higher growth, and it'll bring in money." No, it's never worked out that way. And I think I should also say that one of the myths about Donald Trump, which I hear from people all the time, oh, he's a businessman. He's a successful businessman. I heard an interview yesterday with a New York Times guy who spent years investigating Trump's business, and the guy was an abject failure. People don't understand this. They're conned because he was on a TV show where he pretended to be a successful businessman. He was given 400, I think $400 million by his dad. He lied, said it was just a million. $400 million, and he blew it. He blew it. His father had to bail him out time after time. Most of his casinos all went bankrupt. His airline went bankrupt. His ownership of that New Jersey Generals went bust. Every one of his things. And yet people have been conned thinking this guy's a successful businessman. And as far as your question, Nathan, about what's whether they get back together as friends or not, I hope they don't, because what is really frightening is that this one man, because of his wealth, which outdoes, I think, anybody else on the planet, he may very well have been the difference in Donald Trump winning. Was it
Oh,
100?
he definitely was.
How many?
I think he
200,
definitely was.
180 million? Well, I mean, put it this way: you take that away, that's not small change. He could have been the one, and the fact that one man can exert that kind of influence is so uh, just terrible for our democracy. And think what I was thinking as well in the 2026 elections, and if we have a presidential election in 2028, this guy, I was thinking this guy's just going to buy the election for his side. So I hope they stay apart, because I hope that his influence in our electoral system will
Yeah,
be
I'm with you on
gone.
that. I don't trust Elon at all. When he was going back and forth with Trump, he posted and said something like, Trump's going to be in power for the next 3.5 years, but I'm going to be around for 40 years. And back to your point, Phil, he's saying, look, I'm the wealthiest man in the world. I'm not going anywhere. This guy, he'll be gone and forgotten in 3 years. I'm going to be a major player for the rest of my life. I know you guys disagree with me. I'll say it again. There should be no billionaires. Once you make $999 million, everything else should be 90%.
How do you pick that number?
I just picked it. There should be no billionaires.
Yeah, but I mean, why not 2 million or 10 million or 100 million
Because
or
if you
two
get
billion?
two,
Where'd you come up with
because
the
if you get
number?
2 billion, that means that you're a billionaire. There should be no billionaire from on this planet. It exerts too much wealth, and at the same time, it
That's
hoards too much wealth.
yeah, but like I said, how did you pick that? If that's your position, though, I would offer a different position that I think is better, which I will. But how did you pick that number? Why not 50
I
million? I
picked
mean,
that
how'd
number.
you
I
come up
picked
with
that
it?
number because it's nice and easy. There should be no billionaires. If you
Yeah,
if you want to
that's
cut
true.
that and say, listen, you should make
That's
anything over
true. Yeah,
$500 million, we tax you at 90%. I'm okay with that as well. The concentration
yeah.
of wealth is overall negative for all of us, except for the people with the concentrated wealth. None of us been Our
Well,
society is worse because of billionaires, and Elon Musk is a great example of it. It's worse. We cannot trust one individual to have $500 billion. It's too
Yeah,
much.
I think the issue more than trying to cap what people can earn is how much influence that they're able to have in our political system with that money. And that's been my argument all along, is trying to get the money out of government and out of politics, and more has to be done in that regard, so that because the only way that these millionaires and billionaires have that influence is because they can buy elections, just like Elon Musk did. And so rather than capping people's earning potential and how much money they can have, that's not the problem. It's what the system allows them to do, and how much the system allows them to flood in there to buy elections and to buy candidates. And I don't think you stop that, even if you put a cap on it and you said that there are no billionaires. The issue is not with how much money you got, because a person with $900 million can be just as dangerous as a billionaire. So that's not
No.
the cure all to the problem. The cure all is putting safeguards in the system that
all right,
that stop people who have large sums of money from buying candidates in elections.
But
all
I
right.
see that as
I
two
got the
separate
cure all.
issues.
I got the cure all. Okay, see, Nathan, if you're going to say, well, once you hit $1 billion, what are you going to? We're going to take all your income away. We're going to
We're
tax
gonna
all your
tax it.
income. I'll guarantee. I'll guarantee
Yeah, we should
what?
tax it.
Yeah. Okay. I'll guarantee you that those guys can find ways for they can find ways they turn the factory over to the kids or something. I mean, they could get around that easily. I'll tell you what I think would make the difference is to tax wealth instead of taxing income. I mean, what is so unjust is you could have someone who's a cleaning person or something makes 30,000 a year. You can have a multimillionaire who chooses to put their money in real estate or in municipal bond funds that don't. That $30,000 a year worker is going to pay more tax. Okay, it's incredibly unjust if you tax wealth, okay, that way to answer your concern, if somebody's got a couple $1 billion, I don't know what it is, maybe even just 5%. Okay, that's a huge, that is what will help alleviate this condition that you've talked about the imbalance of wealth, which I agree is a terrible problem, and that we have a disappearing middle class. But I would respectfully say that taxing wealth is the better way to do it.
I think I like your idea. To me, it's all of the above. You know, what I would say is, yeah, we most certainly should be taxing wealth, but also as a standard, I think it would make a much better country. And I think history agrees with me here. You're about to agree with me, Phil, whether you know it or not. Within the next 2 minutes, you're going to agree.
Well, there's got to be a first time.
There's got to be a first time, right? This will be like the third time, though. And for the folks, Kevin stepped away.
As my dad would say, but
But
who's
who's counting,
counting?
right? Okay. So I agree with what you said. We should tax wealth. I agree with Kevin said. We need to take the money out of politics. At the same time, if I ask you a question, Phil, when were the last good times in this country? In your personal opinion, when were the last good times?
Well, are you talking about for everybody or for
I'm just
white
saying in
men?
general.
Well, the whole problem. If you put the issue of racism and sexism aside, I think the '50s and the '60s were pretty good times, and I think we started in the '70s on a slippery slope where Nixon took us off the gold standard, and we started printing money and borrowing money. And if you go back to the '50s, '60s, if you were a teacher or a policeman or something like that, you could buy a house. Okay, you can't now. Okay, with because of the inflation and the other stuff. So, but I mean, it's not that it's complicated because if you were a minority or a woman in those, you were there was severe discrimination that kept you from benefiting from the economy. But I would still say from an economic perspective, I think those are pretty
And
good
I think
times.
that if you ask most people of a certain age when were the best, the last good times, they probably say the same things. They say 60s, 70s. They say something around there. 50s, back when we were taxed and we had a huge tax rate on corporations, right? It was through the roof. Back when we didn't have as many billionaires as we have now, right? Those were the best. There is a relationship between the heavy concentration of wealth in this country in the hands of 2 or 300 people and the effects on everybody else. There is a relationship between the
Well,
two. If I give 2 or 300 people $1 billion, that means that's 2 or 300 billion dollars is not being out there with the rest of the people out there. And I think that if we start to tax wealth, if we said, listen, you made $999 million, you're never going to want for anything again. $999 million? You can't even spend that. If we start to institute that, that means that some of our greatest minds, our titans of industry, will spend the rest of their days thinking about something other than just making a whole lot of money. I mean, just imagine with Elon Musk. This guy's worth all this money, right? Just imagine if this money was somehow going back in our communities, was going toward innovation, was going toward an investment in our children.
okay, but at the same time, the reason I don't agree with your cutoff, I don't care what the cutoff is because when somebody builds whatever a space company or factories, and there's the incentive for people to make more money if you have the right regulations is very important because it means more jobs. If you're saying you get no money after whatever number billion whatever it is, I'm not going to take the time to build a factory or anything because I can't get
I
anything
don't
out
think
of it. So I would respectfully say that I'm glad we agree on the tax on wealth. And I again, you saying the reason the '50s and '60s were good times was because they had high taxes on large income. people with large income. Maybe so, but I would also again point out we had real money
Yeah.
then. Okay, we didn't have the constant inflation and constant debt that we've had since Nixon took us off the gold standard. I think you have to consider that as
Yeah,
well.
and I think that I disagree with you when you say it's not an incentive. To me, $999 million is a heck of an incentive. If you ask most people out there that might be walking
No, but they already have
right,
the money. You're saying okay, but you're saying they can't earn any money essentially
yeah,
after that, and you're saying, and therefore, if some guy owns five factories or he owns five Target stores or whatever it is, okay, a guy and he's worth $1 billion.
yeah,
Okay, well, I mean, why is he going to open more Target
because next
stores to
year
provide jobs? Why is he going to open more factories? Because he won't make any money from them under
he
your
might not
scenario.
make any money, but I think that if you
But why would he do it? Why does he have if he doesn't have the incentive to do it to make money, then he's not
yes,
going
he
to
will.
do it. He's not
Yes, he
doing
will.
it.
Yes.
Why? The
Well,
generosity
I
of
mean,
his
you got
heart? He doesn't have to
stakeholders.
give
No, you
away
got
money?
stakeholders. You got people that work in the company.
Well,
You got vice presidents and directors. All those people can get a bump up in their raise because they're making money.
yeah, but the point is, you can take any of them or any of those people. That if you say once you hit this number, we're not going to let you earn any more money. I'm trying to say that the incentive to build a business and therefore provide
I do
jobs
not
is
believe that
gone.
one bit, Phil. That is not true. If you ask anybody out there, Kevin, right now you got a business, right? You got business interests, correct? Right.
Yes.
If I told you from the very beginning,
No, he's a slumlord. Don't you own a bunch of
I didn't use that word.
rental properties?
Yeah. If I told
No,
you,
no. I give him credit. I give him credit. I know his business model is very good. He buys a building, he evicts the widows and the orphans, then he jacks
yep,
up the rents.
yep,
Isn't that it?
and,
That's a
and
great
turns it into
formula.
luxury apartments.
That's
That's
right.
that's the trend in Cincinnati
It's
right now.
it's
But
working
listen,
well in Cincy right now. Yep.
listen, Phil and Kevin, right? You both have had business interests, right? If I told you at the
Yeah.
beginning where you haven't even laid any bricks for your business, but if I told you that the most amount of money that you're ever going to make from this idea is $999 million, are you going to tell me you're not going to do it because you can't be a billionaire?
No, 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 no. But you're
No,
missing the
you're missing
point.
the point.
I'm not denying. No, I'm not denying that up until I get to that amount, I had the incentive. But what I'm saying is that the guys who hit your number, okay, who might choose because they want more money to go on and build more businesses that provide jobs, they're not
But
going to
Phil,
do it because
they will
they
do it.
only do it to
They
make
will do it
money.
because they want to make $999 million. Then the other thing you got to understand is that
We're not communicating. They've already made
right.
that. That's the
What I'm
point.
saying is,
Okay, and
so what you're trying to tell me is that if we put a cap on the amount of money you can make, and we say, listen, once you make $999 million,
just a second, you're talking about wealth
we're
or
talking
income?
about income and or wealth. It could be both because as we both agree that wealth across the board needs to be taxed. But right now we're just talking about billionaires, right? So you have someone that's got an idea, they're not gonna not do the idea because they're afraid that once they reach $999 million,
No,
the government's gonna take it away from them.
you're still you're not
I
we're not
do
communicating.
understand
Kev,
what you're
Well,
saying.
but no, but you
it
keep talking about the incentive to get up to that mark, which I'm
Right.
fine with. When they're able to. But what I'm trying but you're saying I'm saying the people who are at that mark, and unfortunately there's a lot of them in this country now. Once they get there, they're not
Yes,
after
they
that point. They're not going to open more
okay, then they
businesses
don't
under your
okay,
scenario.
Yeah,
so
well,
you don't open more
but the
businesses.
problem,
Maybe
but the
somebody else
Kevin,
opens up a
jump
yeah,
in
business.
one way
but
or
the
the other.
problem with that is, Nathan, is it kills innovation because
Absolutely does not.
Exactly.
the fact of the matter is that quite frankly, a lot of people who are in that era, just think about a guy like Steve Jobs, you know what I'm saying, who a big part of what he does is innovation and building new products and things of that nature. If I can't make any more money off of my ideas, what is my incentive to be innovative? Because I don't get anything out of it. Yeah, you're assuming that there's some good for humanity altruistic nature that exists among people that makes them do things without desire for profit, but that's a very small percentage of folks, man. And they're not, unfortunately, they're not many of the people who are driving, who are driving a lot of the innovation in our country right now. So
That's a lie.
I agree with Phil.
That's not true. And again, it's a paradigm shift. We're looking at things through two different dynamics. The real innovators are not the Elon Musks. It's not those people. The real innovators are the people that work every single day and come up with ideas. It's small business that really drives our economy. It's small business. And so
Nathan, let me ask you a question. I'm concerned. I think you've been listening to too many Bernie Sanders speeches. Is that correct? Is
no,
that
I've
fair?
just been living long enough in this
Okay, all
world
right,
and have
all right,
and if
all
Bernie
right.
Sanders feels that way, okay, great. But like I said, so one, this idea that everyone is going to become a billionaire needs to be put on the table because that ain't going to happen. Let me just tell you off the top. You got a whole lot of people out there that may have great ideas. You might start a business, but to become a billionaire, you're talking about less than 0.001% of businesses turn into a business that becomes a billionaire that makes $1 billion. So we're not talking about everybody. We're talking about a very, very small percentage of people. And I hear what you're saying. But if somebody, I got a couple business ideas right now. If somebody told me, listen, once you reach $999 million,
You
I
keep doing
am
the same
because
thing.
it's a point that needs
Okay,
to
but
be
what
made.
happens, Nathan? Let's just say you get your ideas out, and you now you're a billionaire. Nathan's a billionaire, and let's say Nathan has some other ideas to make more money. Are you saying that you're going, even though you're not going to make any money, you're going to keep building up these your businesses after that
Yeah,
point?
absolutely.
That's the
Yeah,
question.
absolutely. Yeah, if the government comes in and
For
says,
what's your
listen, we're gonna
incentive?
tax you
What is the reason? What is the
because
reason you do it?
innovators innovate, Phil. That's what they do. Innovators innovate. If you have it in your brain to be an innovator, you're gonna innovate, you're gonna create no matter what.
Even if you're not going to make any
You
money.
got people, most people who are innovators don't make any money, Phil. Most people, when they start a business and they have an innovation, it fails, but they do it anyway. And they're not making any money. They do it anyway. But instead of talking about money, Phil, let's say we were talking about something even just as valuable. Let's say we're talking about water, right? Let's say instead of talking about hoarding money, we're talking about hoarding water, H2O, right? It's the same thing. You know, money is something that is essential to your well-being in your life, just like water is. If we were talking about hoarding water, you would agree with me. You would say, "Nah, you can't hoard water. That's an essential thing. People are going to die." I think it's very similar to money. Money is water for innovators, small business people, people that come from economically depressed backgrounds. I mean, just imagine in America where instead of 400 million or 300 million dollars sitting in a bank somewhere, that money is now being reinvested back into America. I think that's a good thing. I think that's a really good thing. And the only thing that can bad thing that can come from it is that a lot of rich people that don't want poor people moving into their neighborhoods and living the way they do would now have to share the wealth and share the country club and share, the nice places out of Indian Hills because more people will have more. That's just my thoughts. I'm not going to keep going on about it, but that's just how I look at it. And I just don't get it. Like, you know, everybody loves the NFL. We love it. It's socialism that makes it what it is. They revenue share. They have caps on how much money they can spend. They do all of this to make sure that every single team at least has a shot. I wish we would take some of those social policies and principles and tactics that the NFL uses to make the NFL what it is and apply it to our neighborhoods. It's the same concept. It's the
Yeah, Nathan,
same
but
basic
the,
thing.
the the only the only problem with that is the NFL doesn't put a cap on how much owners can make, only how
Yes, they
much
do.
they can spend,
They
only
do
how
put a
much
cap
they
on how
can
much you can spend.
spend.
It's called wait. They have a cap,
Well, it's how much they can spend, not how much they can
right?
make. That's why the Dallas Cowboys are worth 20 times what the
But they
Cincinnati
also
Bengals are.
revenue share, Kevin. The
Yeah, they
Dallas
do. They do
Cowboys
revenue
revenue
share. They
shares
do
with the
revenue
Bengals.
share, Nathan. But here's the thing that you are, this is part of the whole argument that we're having right now with the Bengals and the revenue and the stadium, debate, is that these NFL franchises are out to make money. They're out to make money. And it's that simple. Now the NFL controls how much they can spend, but not how much they can make.
Yeah, but the thing about the NFL is that they all make money because they've all gotten together and they created a system and rules to make sure everybody makes money. The Bengals could the Bengals could go, "Oh,
Do they still have an antitrust exemption, the
I believe
NFL,
they do."
with the
Yeah.
government? Do you
The
know,
Bengals
Kev?
could go 0 and
Well,
18.
that's the. In other words, what they can do, in effect, they're engaging in price fixing. Is what they're doing. It's not an example of
It is example of
socialism, really.
socialism.
It's an example of monopoly or
Well, I
oligopoly.
mean, yeah, I mean, de facto they do, but it is socialism. 100% socialist economic principles is what makes the NFL, all your major leagues do it. They all revenue share. The team that makes the most money shares with the team that makes the least money, because if the team that makes the least money doesn't is not successful, the whole thing ain't successful.
See,
We need to
I'm
bring
not
that
sure that
same.
that's how. I'm not
Okay, well,
100% sure that that's
I
how the
am.
NFL revenue
I'm
sharing model.
100,000% for sure. 1,000%. Look it up. They absolutely do. They all revenue share. They have a cap, and
I
they
know they
make
revenue
sure.
share, but I'm not sure it works the way you said, the way you just
How
articulated
else
it
does
right there.
revenue sharing work, Kevin? The team that makes the
I
most
think
money,
they
the
share.
Dallas Cowboys, shares that
Nathan.
with the other
I
team.
think the
they
revenue.
share they share
I think
some
that, yeah,
things like
exactly.
TV revenue. They
That's the
don't share
revenue that
I
they
never
everything.
share.
said they did. I never said
They
they shared
share.
everything.
Yeah, they share TV revenue, but Dallas
They
doesn't
share
have to
more than that.
give. Dallas doesn't have to give the Bengals a share of their club seat revenue or stadium ticket sales revenue. That's crazy.
Oh, it may be crazy, but I'm just telling you what they do. You can look it up for yourself. They all
No,
revenue
they
share.
don't. They don't
The
share that.
teams that make the most money this is common knowledge. The teams that make the money in the NFL, that's
No,
The Dallas
I had to look
Cowboys.
that up
They
because I don't.
look it up. They revenue share.
but if they revenue share, why would anybody make more
They
than
all
anybody
make
else? You said they
because the
split
NFL
everything.
is set up to make money no matter what. It doesn't matter. The Bengals could go
No,
0 and
I know
18 for
that,
the
but what I'm
next.
saying is, you're saying they split
I
all
didn't
the
say they
revenue,
split
but
all the
you're
revenue.
saying
What I
Dallas
said is
makes
they
more money.
revenue share. I didn't say they
Oh,
split everything.
okay. Okay, they revenue share on certain items
Don't
like
matter. They're
TV
revenue sharing.
revenue. They
They're
don't share
revenue
everything.
sharing. And they do that because they want to make sure that everybody makes money. If the Bengals went 0 and 18 for the next 10 years, they're making hundreds of millions of dollars no matter what, because of the way the system is set up with the NFL. They got a great bit. I wish I had an
All right.
NFL team.
First of all, I would respectfully say you're, if you don't mind, misusing the term socialism. And I speak with authority because I have been accused not only on this show, but by my best friend, the former associate athletic director at UNC, of being a
Well,
socialist. A term, a designation that I strongly resent. But
when you
uh,
it's socialism.
socialism
It's socialist.
socialism refers
It's a
to the
socialist
government.
economic policy.
Socialism refers to
It's a
government running things,
socialist
not private
economic policy.
guys.
That's exactly what it is. When you're in the NFL and you have a cap and you tell a team that you can't spend as much money as you actually have because we want to make sure that it doesn't disproportionately impact the rest of the league, that's socialism. That's exactly what that is. They're saying you've got to sacrifice for the greater good. That's what they're saying.
But there is the NFL. It's not the government. Socialism refers to the
What?
government.
You never heard of socialist economic principles?
Socialism refers to the government splitting, saying you can only you
Yeah,
regulating. It doesn't
it
reference
absolutely
private
does. Phil, what are you
businesses
talking
that are
about?
basic.
You never heard of socialist economic principles? This is something can be applied whether it's a government or the NFL or the NBA or the NHL or MLB or soccer. They all do it. And because they realize it is that if you have a neighborhood, you're only as strong as the weakest house on that neighborhood. That's what they realize. We don't want the Cincinnati Bengals to be so outpaced by the money that the Dallas Cowboys could bring that they're not even compatible. So what do? They say, listen, this is you can only spend so much money. We know you got more, but you can only spend so much money. Why? Because other teams can't pace you. And they do that so that everybody can be competitive. And that's one of the reasons why we love the NFL. That's why every NFL team has a fan base, because every team
Hey
feels
Nathan,
like
just
at the
to
beginning
borrow.
of the season that they can go in and they have a legitimate shot of winning a championship. They get every single team. You could take the team that the
Hey,
Bears,
Nathan.
the Chicago Bears fan base, as we go into this year, they feel like they have a shot to win a championship. And that's a feeling that the NFL has worked really, really hard to to create. And it works.
Hey, Nathan. Let me just run this past you using your NFL analogy and this notion that
It's
revenue
not a
sharing and
notion.
fairness makes everybody
Every
competitive.
revenue
You know,
sharing
just
in the
ask people.
NFL
Just
makes
just
it's not just revenue sharing, it's also the fact they have a cap. That those two
hey.
things work to make sure that every single team is a little bit more, there's more equity, more parity is the word they use, parity in the league.
hmm Yeah, there's more equity and parity, but then you also have teams like we question here in Cincinnati who are just satisfied with getting their little piece, and they're not even concerned about being competitive or being innovative, which is kind of the Phil's point about what can happen with the complacency of people being guaranteed to get things that they didn't necessarily earn. And so I think that on some level, look, I don't have an issue with coming up with a better system. I'm not saying that there isn't a better system out there, but I'm totally against people not having ideas, not having things that they come up with, and not being able to maximize that to the fullest of the potential, whatever that may be. And the notion that I should have to forego something that I've earned to give somebody that which they did not earn. I think that's the issue that
Huh?
you come up with in most of
That they
these
didn't
in most
earn.
of these conversations.
I don't even understand what you're talking about. It seems like you changed the conversation a bit. Like who didn't earn
Well, no,
something?
you're yeah. So in other words, Nathan, let's just say if I have that 900 million billion dollar idea or whatever it was that you said, and then I come up with a whole bunch of other ideas that then I can't monetize. But who's gonna take the revenue from my idea that I came up with that I can't monetize? Who gets
Well,
that
number
money?
one, nobody does anything on their own. That's number one. So if you had an idea, if you were able to work that idea to put it in a position that you could make $1 billion, you ain't do it by yourself. You got a whole team behind you, and more than likely, you probably got some government subsidies, depending on what it is,
Yeah,
or some state subsidies.
well, a whole team behind me that I'm paying. So it's like, nah, it's not like these people are doing it out of the good, like they're helping me deliver on my idea out of the kindness of their heart. They're collecting a check
Right,
behind that.
right, and
So they're getting something out
yeah,
of it.
and so are you. You got $999 million out of it.
No, no, I'm not. I'm not getting anything out of my new ideas because I'm not making any more than 999
But that's
million
the
dollars.
idea. I think that's what we need to attack. And I think that's part of the problem that our society has, is that we think that everything is all about money, and we think that every idea needs to be monetized. And that's part of the problem. It's that capitalistic mindset. If you made $999 million, Kevin, and you decided, hey, I got another idea that'll be good to society, you do it or you don't do it, or somebody else does it. It's just that simple. No one person can do everything, but the greater good is what we're looking at. And I just don't see any good with having 4 or 5 people worth $100 billion. I don't see no good from it whatsoever. There is no good for our society. Now, society benefited the billionaire. Elon Musk, he made his money and his empire off of us, the taxpayers. So once he makes $999 million, pay it back to the taxpayers. I've got no problem with that. To me, it just makes perfect sense. Uh, a lot of these big titans of industry, they got there through government subsidies, contracts, state subsidies, contracts that help them to build their empire. So when you get there, give it back. Simple as that. It ain't hard. And yeah, you might not have $200 billion, but you don't need it anyway. So what? Spread that money to your underlings. Spread that money to the
Hey
workers.
Nathan, what if somebody who had less than you right now rolled up on you and looked at your budget and told you, man, you don't need that $200 that you about to go out here and do this, that, on the other on. You would tell them where to go. So I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying in principle. I just don't think the solution is trying to cap people's earning potential and what
Oh, it
they can and what they
absolutely
can
is, and the
make.
NFL tells us because, like I said, the Dallas Cowboys. There's a couple teams that could way out if there was no cap in the NFL, all of the good players would be on 2 or 3 teams because those teams would have the money
Yeah,
to
that's how it
afford it.
is in Major League Baseball.
Right.
That's how it is in
I'm
Major
just
League
saying,
Baseball.
if it was that way in the NFL, you'd have two of the Dallas Cowboys would have all the good players because there's no cap. They could simply outspend everybody else. So it's just not good for the NFL. And I don't think it's good for our country. It is not good.
So again, that goes back to what my overall point was about money in politics. You're talking about a cap that places a limit on how much a team can spend. That's very different than saying there's a cap on how much the Dallas Cowboys can make. There is no such rule in the NFL. The Dallas Cowboys can make as much revenue as they want to generate. You're talking about revenue sharing. Okay, that's a form of tax.
Exactly.
But the way the
And that's my
NFL
point.
rev, the way the NFL rev, right? But Nathan, taxing is very different than saying you can't make any more than this.
It's
That's what you're
taxing.
failing to
Taxing
see.
is
I'm not saying I don't have a problem. I don't have a problem with taxing. Taxes as much as you
you
as
just
rate
made
as
my
you
point
think you
for
can
me.
come up with. But you can't tell me how much I can
I
make.
absolutely
I'm just not in
I
favor of that. If you want to tax, fine. If you want to cap spending and what people can put into campaigns, fine. I agree with all of that. But saying that somebody can't maximize their potential, I just don't agree with
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I understand. Anthony Wright sounds to me like that Nate is preaching that trickle down that Republicans always preach, but never make it to the happen. Nah, I ain't saying nothing like that. What I'm saying is something that most people don't even think about. I'm rethinking capitalism. I'm rethinking it. It ain't working. Period. It don't work. It causes extreme poverty. It causes the issues that we see. So at some point, somebody has to say, how do we rethink this? And part of that for me is placing a cap. We don't need any billionaires. Nobody in this country is greatly getting ahead unless you're a part of billionaires' family. Then it all works. Then it all works. So no, it's not trickle down is what the Republicans are about to do. They want to cut taxes, and then they'll say, "Well, when you give wealthy people more of their money back, they innovate." Bull crap. The real innovators are the middle class people that have built this country. Those are the real innovators, and some of them might need some seed money to take their ideas to the next level. You know what I'm saying? That's all I'm saying. So no, I'm not saying that at all, Anthony. What I'm saying is extreme capitalism, extreme wealth creates extreme poverty. That's what I'm saying. Extreme wealth creates extreme poverty. If you're okay with extreme poverty, then I guess you're okay with extreme wealth. You know, this idea that you might wake up tomorrow and come up with an idea and make $1 billion. I'm never going to tell another man or woman what won't happen. But, you know, statistics will probably tell us that's probably a long shot. More than likely, you're never going to be a billionaire. So why are everybody advocating for billionaires, Phil? I don't get it.
Who's
Kevin
advocating
was.
for billionaires?
You said, I don't want anybody putting a cap on the amount of money
I
I'm
don't.
making.
I'm not
Well,
advocating for
yeah.
That's what you're
billionaires.
doing.
I'm advocating for people to be able to get and maximize as much as they can from their potential and their ideas.
And
That's
if
all
you
I'm
do it
saying.
all by
I don't want
yourself,
anybody. I don't want anybody. I don't want anybody. You, the government, my mama. I don't want anybody telling me how much money I can make. I just don't.
yeah, you got to get past that. I hear what you're saying. Like, you got to get past that, Kevin, and really,
Excuse me. Are you his
yeah, I'm his
therapist?
therapist.
What's
To
going
get
on
this
here?
country to where we need to be,
Not that he doesn't need one, but I'm not sure
I'm
you're the
most
right
certainly the
guy.
right guy. You know, you got to get past that. And Americans got to start looking at capitalism differently. We got to stop like fetishizing and putting these people up on some pedestals because they made a lot of money. And what we got to start thinking is how do we address the extreme situations that we see people in? How do we address that? You know, how do we address that? You know, how do we address the extreme situations? And part of that is we need to attack extreme wealth. You know, we're real good at having conversation about extreme poverty. We're good with that. We are less comfortable with talking about extreme wealth and what we need to do to mitigate that for the greater good of everybody. I guess in my world, I want everybody to live good, not just two or three because they came up with an idea and they were there for everybody should be living good. Period. Or should I say, better yet, there is a bottom that nobody should go lower than. You put it that way. There's a bottom that no, I don't care what you're doing in this country, you should never go lower than a certain level because once you do, it's just all bad. Nobody benefits from that.
So is that based on what somebody earns, Nathan, or what, or just some fair system where we think people should be given something?
Yeah, I think people should be given something. Yeah, I do.
No,
Yeah,
I don't. I don't
yeah.
agree with
I
that.
think.
I agree with there are certain things that people should be entitled to, like healthcare and things of
Well,
that
then you think that people
nature.
should be given
But
something.
the
Then
but
then
the
we talking about the same thing.
but the crux and the essence of what we all do is everything that you get, you work for, and that you earn. And I just don't think because of the nature of people that you give people, and Lord knows I do it too. I People tell me all the time, "Hey man, you got a pastor's heart." But the reality is that there are that going out and earning something is a motivation. If you give people things, just give them things without having to earn it or do anything, that is going to er- greatly erode productivity and a whole lot of other
I don't believe
things.
that.
And I just don't think it's a smart
I don't
idea.
believe that. I don't believe your parents gave you a lot of stuff.
Oh, come on, man. Listen,
Kevin, your parents
listen. There are
gave
a
you a
whole
lot of
lot of people.
stuff.
Nathan, I'm gonna just say this. I'm gonna say this. There are a whole lot of people, myself included, who, if I didn't have to get up out of the bed in the morning and drive downtown and go to work, I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't do it. So quit telling that lie that there are just these whole bunch of people out here who just gonna be motivated to get up and go do something if they open up their mailbox and
That's
there's a
called the
check
slippery
there.
slope, folks.
That's just not
That's called the
true.
slippery slope. So now you're taking a conversation to an extreme end to make a point. So we're not talking about giving somebody a full salary. Let's just say healthcare. In my opinion, every American, in fact, every person in this country deserves a modicum level of health insurance protection. I don't care if they work or not. Period. This is America. This is America. And I don't believe that one bit. There's a whole lot of people that if they had a mechanism, and we have that now, Obamacare, Medicaid, Medicare, there's a whole lot of people that would take that and still work. I know people that do that. They do that. But their circumstances just led them to where they are now. And that is what the government should do. It should protect us from ourselves in some cases, but certainly protect us from, domestic and foreign enemies. And to me, a domestic enemy is the huge concentration of wealth, i.e., billionaires. Elon Musk is worth $400 billion. That is stupid. It ain't cool. There's nothing good about that. What's good about that? Nothing. Who is that benefiting? Nobody. So unleash the money.
I think we probably all agree that is not a good situation. I certainly do, but it's the means that you go about changing it. I think that is what we're talking about.
Well, let's go on. We've been stuck on that for a minute. Let's move on. We brought up rent a little earlier, and I saw something that just kind of just I thought, oh dear. Cincinnati. Matter of fact, let me put it on the screen for the audience as well. I don't think this ain't good unless you can afford it, I guess. But Cincinnati sees the biggest rent increase in the nation even as rents fall nationwide. A new report shows the median asking rent in Cincinnati hit an all time high of $1,460 a month in May. And, what kind of city are we building? Are we building a city that's going to be accessible to all? Don't seem like it. Like I'm cool. Listen, I have no problem with people out there making their money and you're doing your thing. You're building new businesses and you're providing places for people. That's great. Luxury apartments in Cincinnati is the number one thing now. Luxury apartments for 15, 18, $2,200. I mean, they're all over the city right now. And is this good?
So
Well,
are you
that's my
saying that's a
question. Is
bad
is
thing?
this a good thing or a bad thing for the city that rent is so high? Because I think it's terrible.
Well,
Well,
well, it. Go ahead,
no,
Kevin.
I was just going to say the one thing. So here's what you got to read sometimes in these stories. So it says that the average rent in Cincinnati increased at a rate higher than the rest of the nation, which is absolutely 100% true. But when you look at the average rent in Cincinnati compared to the national average, Cincinnati is still well below the national average. The national average for rent is around $2,100 a month. Cincinnati is around 1,400, $1,500 a month. So when you talk about what the national average amount that people are paying per month in rent, Cincinnati is still one of the probably among the more affordable places in the country to live. So there's a difference between the amount by the percentages by which rent is increasing and what the overall average rent is in Cincinnati compared to the rest of the country. So I think that that's an important detail detail to note, is that it's still more expensive to live in other parts of the country than it is in
Yeah, I read
Cincinnati.
something different though. I read that the national average decreased by 1% over the last year, but it's still around 1,600 um, on the national end. But I mean, I would say 1,600 to 2,200. That's significant. 500 a month. It's a whole lot of people that can't make that jump. Um, and what concerns me the most is that let's say what you're saying is true. Let's say the national is 2,200. It looks like Cincinnati is quickly trying to get there. And so, is this good or bad for the city?
Well, it's not good for the city if you've got a ton of people who can't afford to live in, to live in their homes. I always say, look, it doesn't matter what something is someplace else. We live here. So like I'm concerned about the conditions and what the ramifications are in the place where I live. So you can always say, hey, it's more expensive someplace else. Well, that's great. I don't live there. I live here in Cincinnati and this is what I make and this is what I can afford. So I think that, that's what you have to be cognizant of. And the real issue is people's wages are not increasing. It's like the rents are going up sometimes annually. Landlords are raising rent. Sometimes they're raising rent every 6 months on tenants. I've heard of cases like that, here in Cincinnati. And most people's wages are not going up at the same percentage rate that their rent is going up. And that's a problem. So not only does Cincinnati have to address the affordable housing issue by having more, not just apartments that people can rent, but you got to be able to have homes that people can afford to move into. I get everybody doesn't want to be a homeowner, but I'll just say this: there are some people who I know who are paying more a month on rent than I pay on the mortgage in the house that I live in. And um
Equity.
they don't have any kind of investment, that they can leverage in that. And so that's a shame, where you have some people who are paying mortgage style rent prices for an apartment in which they can't leverage that or use that in any way. So the city has to address those two things: wages and creating more affordable opportunities.
Yeah. I think we need price controls. I know we can't do. We know we can't do rent control because of the state. Feels like what is he talking about? Yeah, we need rent control. We need the city of Cincinnati.
I mean, are you talking about the city or the state of the
I mean, well, I'm
country?
just talking about the city right now in Cincinnati. I mean, we definitely need. I, I wish the city council had the ability to put in
Well,
some rent controls to say, "Hey, listen."
well, I
I
think
don't
they
think they
do
do.
have
I
the
think the state has
ability
blocked
to
them.
do it.
Last time I checked, was just
Well, it's possible, but putting that aside, I mean, I'm involved. I'm a member of the Real Estate Investors Association, which is basically small investors. It's not the big companies. And whenever the city of Cincinnati puts in something that discourages buying property and fixing up property, people just don't do business there. They just buy property or build property outside the city in the county. All you're doing is you're creating less housing in the long run when you put rent controls
really.
on.
How's that work? So if I have rent control,
Yeah.
are
How's it
you telling
work?
me people are not going to want to or $1,000 more
And that kind of
on the
what?
rent per month? Wouldn't
Excuse me.
want to invest in buying real estate? I don't believe that.
Yeah. Well, not talking about I'm not
Right.
talking
You're talking about
about
the people that
homeowners. I'm
invest
talking
and buy the
about
homes and then sell them.
well, it could be a home or it could be an apartment, either way. But the point is, if I have a choice between buying or building a property in I don't know, Madisonville. Okay, and I know that the rents I can get
Sure.
are capped at 1,500 a month or something. But if I can build the same thing in Norwood or Kenwood, I can get up to 2,000. Where do you think I'm going to build? Where do you think I'm going to buy?
Say that for me one more time because we were dropping the connection, and I fear that people didn't hear
Nathan, you're
everything you said.
Yeah,
fading.
you're freezing up.
The connection was soft for a second. Can you say what you just said again, Phil? Because I missed it.
Sure. The reason people, and I own, Kevin, I guess does too. The reason people, well, one of the considerations when you're, say, buying an apartment building or buying a house that you're going to rent out, or building an apartment building or whatever. Okay, it's, as Kevin said before, it's basically, we do it for the money. Okay, if I think one should act with integrity, and one should want to treat their renters and contractors and everything well and respectfully. But it's the incentive is to make money. Okay, and what I'm saying is, the reason why the city passing various regulations, there's others besides rent control the city has passed. The reason for not doing that is because people have a choice of building or buying investment properties if anywhere, if they live anywhere in the Cincinnati area, Northern Kentucky, Norwood, Springdale, wherever. Okay, and if there is rent control, if you're limited in what you can make in the city limits, you're just going to build or buy outside those limits.
Some people will, Phil. I agree with that. I think some people will. But I also think that there will still be a market for those investors who like yeah, investors who are looking to maximize their profits and do as much as they can. You're absolutely right. They'll build, they'll buy, they'll do whatever in other places that don't have those controls. But I think in that vacuum, what you might see, it's not guaranteed, but what you might see is folks who are looking to get that investment who would be okay with getting whatever that rent control top is, and those folks might fall in and fill in those spaces. Now that's not a guarantee, but I think it's a mistake to assume that that would create a vacuum that wouldn't be filled by somebody if
Well,
that's the
maybe
case.
vacuum isn't the right word. I would call it disincentive. If the goal is to provide more housing and better housing in the city, I'm just saying capping rents is not going to achieve that goal. It's going to discourage that goal. I agree. There'll be some people who will still do it. And typically what happens too is that when you are limited the rent you can take in, what tends to happen is they tend not to spend as much to fix up properties, because the reason you put money in to fix up a property is because you want to get more income out of it. And if you're capped there, you're not going to spend that money.
Yeah. I think the other thing that they would have to come up with is because I think one of the other things is very real um, part of this whole game is property taxes, valuation increases. A lot of times landlords will increase rent as property taxes and things of that nature go up so that it doesn't eat into their profit. I mean, I think at the end of the day, you got to recognize what Phil is saying is true, is anybody that's in the landlord business does it so that they can make money. And the idea is, hey, if my property valuations go up and my taxes are going to go up, guess who that gets passed along to? Just like, companies pass tax increases, tariffs, and things like that onto the consumers, landlords do the same thing. When their property taxes go up, that gets passed on to the renter. So you would in all likelihood have to come up with something as well that would address that.
Yeah, I think most renters may agree. Like, hey, if the property tax went up and you want to charge me a little bit more to, mitigate and balance out what you're paying now, yeah. But I'm not so sure that's what's happening in Cincinnati. I mean, I've heard stories of straight up greed where people's rent doubled in a month. So we talking about two completely different things. I
It's supply and
but
demand
it's
is what
also
it is.
greed. It's also greed. That's
Hmm?
what happens
The more, well, I mean,
in moments of crises.
well, you know what it comes down to? A lot of these issues, Nathan, is, I think, and I would say that I have a biblical view of human nature. Okay, and that view is kind of like Jesus said, "There's evil in the hearts of all of us." And I think it's always better to assume that people are going to act in their own selfish interests than it is to assume that they're going to act for the benefit of
Yeah,
others.
for sure. And that's why we need rent control. Because without it, you're gonna have very few people. I mean, Kevin's talked about how he's a good landlord, and I believe it, just knowing him. I believe what he's saying. They ain't all like that. There's some cutthroats out there who
Yeah.
they don't care about nothing. I want this rent, and I get it. And if the rent goes up by $200 or $300, so what? You can't afford to get somebody else. There's too many stories like that in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
In Cincinnati,
And
and
that's
it needs to
true.
be addressed. And the way you do that is you say,
Yeah.
hey, listen, you can't double your rent in a month or 2 months or 3 months. You can double it, but you got to double it in 2 years, or maybe it's a year. I mean, the people whose job it is to figure that kind of
If
stuff
there
out
if there
will
are
figure that
enough,
kind of
if
stuff
there's a
out.
bigger, if there if there is enough, it all comes down to supply and demand. If you have, that's why across the country now, not so much actually in the Midwest, but prices on real estate are starting to either decline, or at least the houses are staying on the market a lot longer. Because I read up on all this kind of stuff, and the reason is because there have been a lot more houses that have come on the market, which is the reason. In as far as what we're talking about here, as far as rent, if you want to keep rents down, okay, what you want to do is increase the supply by encouraging more people to build and buy in the city. And therefore, you want to have policies, the local government wants to have policies that provide incentives to build in Cincinnati or buy in Cincinnati
Well, if that's
rather
true,
than in
why is
Kenwood.
rent so high in Cincinnati? Because there's a whole lot of competition right now.
Yeah, yeah. Because here's what happens. Here's what happens, and this is where what Phil is saying. I understand what he's trying to say in principle, but here's where it falls flat, because this is what happens: is when you have new market rate or luxury apartments that go into Hyde Park or some of these communities, and they're charging $2,500 a month, and they increase what the average is across the market. That has a trickle down effect, because smaller landlords start to see, okay, well, they're getting 2,500 a month in here in Hyde Park, and that's raising the average, so I can raise my rent up by like $200 or $300. And that's what generally happens. So yes, building building more apartments could create more competition if you had somebody who was of the mind that said, "Hey, I just want to come in and I want to corner the market, instead of trying to get 500 people who will pay me 2,500 a month. Maybe I'll try to get a whole bunch of properties and charge less than that, and then make that money up in volume." But most people ain't gonna go through that field. They're gonna look at how can they maximize the most profit with the least amount of work or input that they have to put into it. And so if I can own two or three properties, and I can get and manage two or three properties at $3,000 a month versus having 15 that I got to keep on in track on, lowering the rent to try to get more people to make up for that, I'm gonna go for the two or three properties. And so the byproduct of building more and bringing in these luxury apartments, and the mistake I think the city officials make, because I think they believe in that trickle down housing effect, that if we just bring in more high priced housing options, there'll be a trickle down effect that'll create more affordable housing down the line. And that's not what's
Nope.
happening. It's people who own those other properties, they're jacking up the
Yep.
prices too, because
And
they
it's not
can now.
going to happen because of greed. And that's why you need the government to say enough is enough. Yeah, it's about supply and demand, but it's also about equity. It's also about making sure that people can actually afford, that more people from diverse backgrounds, diverse economic backgrounds can be in this city, can afford to live in this city and raise a family in this city. It's getting way, way, way expensive. And unless the government comes in, the landlords are not going to do it just because they're good guys. Everybody ain't like Kevin or Phil. They're just not going to do it. And I get it. It's money, it's capitalism. I get it. But once again, that's my thing for today's show. There's a greater good. There's a greater good. And you got plenty of cities, primarily blue cities, that have either rent control or rent stabilization policies in place, and they're thriving. So, this whole idea that rent control is going to drive the market down, that's just potential property owners belly aching about something that might cost them more, or they might make less money out of their investment. That's how I see it. I'm just
Okay, well, I would say that when you're designing a system or designing a law or piece of legislation, I'm just saying it's in designing it, it's best to assume that people are going to act in their own self-interest. It's best to assume that they are not, even though different people will, it's best to assume that people are in effect going to be greedy and are going to do what brings the most money to them. I'm saying that's
Right.
what one should assume in
But
designing
that's
a
you're
law or
making my point
system.
for me, Phil. I am assuming that about landlords and property owners. And that's why I'm saying we need the government. I wish city council could, but I think if I remember correctly, their hands are tied behind their backs. They can't pass any.
Well, they've enacted a bunch of, believe me, having been at these real estate investor meetings, they've enacted over the years, and you know, somebody we ought to have on this show who's started or really knows this is Vina Jones. If you want to have someone who knows every detail of this, she would be excellent to have on. But one of the things she has pointed out, and others have pointed out, is over the years, the city council has tried or has enacted different
Mhm.
kinds of regulations about what you can do with the investment, what you can do with property, what you can't. And it sounds like a do-gooder, a good thing. This required them to fix everything up to a certain scale and all this kind of stuff. The problem, though, is that when you make it less profitable to invest in the city, people will
Yeah,
invest outside
they
the
will.
city.
Absolutely. But I think Kevin's on point when he says, yes, some will, but some won't. You know, when there's money to be made, believe me, somebody's going to show up and make that money. It's just the way capitalism works, right? There, some
Yeah,
people they'll think that's not enough for me. I get it. They're looking for a bigger return, but there are some people who are thinking this is exactly what I need. They could be getting started in their real estate empire. You know, you just never know where people are.
yeah, I think, but I do think there is the very real reality of, is the investment worth it, right? When you're talking about, when you're looking at it from a business standpoint, and this gets to Phil's point about how much profit that you can make off of an enterprise, right? So there does come a point in any investment of diminishing returns. In other words, what I'm putting into this in energy, effort, and finances, what I'm getting back is not worth that time, energy, and investment. So I think to some degree that's kind of what Phil's talking about. And look, I mean, being in the landlord game is not an easy thing. And I think, as somebody pointed out in the comments section, there's a difference between the private, individual landlord, Joe Blow, average citizen, like myself, who might have one or two spots, and then these big corporations or banks that come by and own a whole bunch of properties. I think those are two, very different circumstances, because, you know, in addition to the rent that you're charging is not just money, just white meat that you're just taking and spending or stacking. I mean, you have to run your rental properties like a business. I mean, because the fact of the matter is you get landlord or you get tenants in there, sometimes they don't take care of your property, and when they move out and you get a new tenant, you got to spend money, and that's money that you got to extract and save from what you get from rent. So it's not just as simple as every dollar that a landlord collects in rent like goes in his pocket to spend on discretionary things. I mean, if you're in it as a business, you got to run it like a business, and so there are a lot of things involved in that I think, to Phil's point, do make profits an important part of that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Again, the last time I checked, that was a few months ago, just went on Google. I believe the state legislator has handcuffed the various cities like Cincinnati, and they can't pass any kind of rent control, just like they can't do anything about guns and all that kind of stuff, because that's the state stopping them. I wish it wasn't like that. I think it would make Cincinnati a better place, a more equitable place, a more diverse place. Because pretty soon, I mean, let's be called. I mean, Cincinnati's been completely downtown. Cincinnati's been completely gentrified, and as you're going out more and more, you're going to see more of it. I just don't think it's good for the overall city in terms of diversity and building the very best city. But that's just my opinion. I'm sure other people have a different opinion, and nobody is right, nobody is wrong. At least not yet, anyway. Maybe a little
Well, I
bit.
do think I do think to your point, Nathan, the city does need to take a look at, like, again, there should be certain protections in place for renters that says that landlords cannot do unreasonable things like doubling your rent, you know, multiple times, throughout the course of a year. I mean, I do think those are situations where you have landlords who are trying to take advantage of tenants or get tenants out so that they can move in new people and charge higher rates of rent. I've heard stories of that where they'll try to create such a hardship on a tenant who's paying a low rent now to get them out so that they can bring in a new tenant and raise the rent prices. I think, there should be some protections, I think, for renters along those lines to keep them from unscrupulous business practices without totally limiting, the freedom that a landlord has to set their rental rates. But I do think there are these outrageous stories that you hear about that people absolutely should be protected from.
Yeah. And they're way more common than people might think about it. Like some of the stuff that was happening during COVID is criminal, straight up criminal. During COVID, people's rent being jacked up, like you just described, people being intimidated off their property because the property owner realizes I can jack it up maybe 1,000, maybe 500. And I get it. Y'all want to make money, but man, that's just straight up wrong, especially during a pandemic. But we are where we are. Let's move on here. So we didn't talk about this, but it's never too late. I want to play this video. This video is from a Republican senator. Her name is Joni Ernst, and she says something wild at one of her town halls. I'm just loving what's happening at the town halls. I love to see Republicans are standing up for their rights and asking the right questions and challenging Republican elected officials. So that's what this was.
Okay, you're assuming, just to be clear, we talked this before. Even it isn't necessarily Republicans that are showing up. Anybody can show up. It could be a red state, which that her state is, and it may be Republicans get her elected, but you don't know for sure. The people showing up there could all be Democrats. It's just one assumption.
That's a very cynical assumption. You sound like the Speaker of the House who's trying to deflect and make you sound like the Speaker of the House who's trying to deflect and make it seem like Republicans aren't waking up. I'm gonna give my Republican brothers and sisters a little bit more credit. They are waking up and they are asking.
When have you given Republicans
I just gave them credit right there.
Credit?
I just gave them credit.
What is this?
I'm giving these good men and women who I've seen in numerous town hall videos their credit. They are waking up and they are asking questions and they are challenging their elected officials. So that's what this situation was. So someone stood up and asked this is a Senator Joni Ernst, a question about the Medicaid cuts. And here's what she had to say.
The government. And he's been very clear about it. He's been good about it. In 4 months, he's made it in.
When we're talking about the corrections in this reconciliation bill, again, it's corrections of overpayments and people that have not been eligible for these programs by law as it is currently written. So when you are arguing about illegals that are receiving Medicaid benefits, 1.4 million, 1.4, they are not.
I just want to make a point here. Listen to how the Republican elected officials shovel that BS right back at the people that they started with, right? So Republicans, along with Fox News, they whip people into a frenzy about the illegals on Medicaid, right? So then when they start cutting it, she's like, look, this is what you said. Check it out.
Eligible, so they will be coming off. So people are not, well, we all are going to die. So for heaven's sakes, folks, okay.
So this is Joni Ernst. She says, well, in a moment, and I get it, she's on the stage, everybody's looking at her, maybe she's uncomfortable. I don't know what the case may be, but what came out of her mouth can only be called macabre at the very least. She essentially said, look, yeah, people might die, but you're going to die anyway. So who cares about these government programs? And she took a lot of heat for this. Well, she followed up. It doesn't end. She took crazy heat for this. So what she decided to do was to double down. And she made another video. This time she went to a cemetery, y'all. I'm not making this up. This is a grown woman. This is an elected official who is responding to people who are righteously upset about what it means to their life to lose Medicaid, to lose Medicare. She makes a crazy comment like that. And then she comes back. Check this. I want to play this for you. Check this out.
My first career.
Hello, everyone. I would like to take this opportunity to sincerely apologize for a statement that I made yesterday at my town hall. See, I was in the process of answering a question that had been asked by an audience member when a woman who was extremely distraught screamed out from the back corner of the auditorium, "People are going to die." And I made an incorrect assumption that everyone in the auditorium understood that, yes, we are all going to perish from this earth. So I apologize. And I'm really, really glad that I did not have to bring up the subject of the tooth fairy as well. But for those that would like to see eternal and everlasting life, I encourage you to embrace my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
I thought she was gonna say, "My Lord and Savior, the devil." She sounds like a straight demon. That's what I thought she was gonna say. So not only does she say the most incredibly insensitive and just dehumanizing, just "I don't care about you" thing, she doubles down by making a video where she makes fun of it. "I thought you were intelligent. I thought we didn't believe in the tooth fairy." What in the world? And and you know what? The people deserve better. I'll put it that way. The people deserve better. But then she wants this whole thing about Jesus Christ. So wait a minute. Don't worry about my Medicaid. Embrace Jesus. What in the world is happened to your party, Phil? What's happened to these people?
I read a story somebody sent me by a column by David French, who's a Christian guy, and he was talking about just this situation. And he talked about the problem with, as he put it, evangelicals today. And frankly, it's mostly white evangelicals. The problem is that they have what he called a vertical relationship with God. Oh yeah, like her. Oh, I'm a Jesus follower, but they don't have the horizontal love for people. In other words, somebody like this is willing to allow 10 million people to lose their health coverage. But I'm a Christian because I've got this. And his point was that Jesus was very clear that he said, as you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. So you cut someone off health care, which this is what this does, this bill in many respects. You're cutting Jesus. That sounds trite. You're cutting Jesus health care. Okay, when you don't provide, when you cut off USAID, and particularly this column was talking about the AIDS program. George W. Bush, I wasn't a big fan. It is his AIDS program in, I think, Africa mostly, is credited with saving like 27 million lives, and they've cut that out. Okay, and the same people who cut that out, they're the first ones to talk about, my Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Well, it sounds to me, as I've said before, that they're reading their Bibles are the words, certain words about helping the poor and visit healing the sick. Apparently, those words are just blacked out of their Bibles.
Yeah, I would say, and I'm never a big fan of these politicians when they, you know, try to bring in Jesus and the Bible and all of this sort of stuff to undergird certain points that they want to make. I mean, look, the Bible tells us that you can judge Jesus's followers by their fruits. In other words, look at what they do. Look at what they say. Look at how they treat people, right? You can claim and say anything, but I'd rather see a sermon than hear one, right? I can see your sermon by how you live your life every day. And I think Joni Ernst, what she said was just the most dismissive, the most insulting, the most offensive thing that you could say to people who are concerned about their health and their livelihoods and the livelihoods of somebody. We're all gonna die. Yeah, no stuff, right? We all know that. We didn't need Joni Ernst to sit up there and say that. But what I don't need is my government helping me meet my maker any quicker than I need to, right? Because you're not providing me with the health insurance or the benefits that we should have. And so I think this is the age that we're in. We're in the age of Trump. This is a Donald Trump thing, and there's so many Republicans who are a part of the party now who've drunk the MAGA Kool-Aid, who think they can come out and they can make these sarcastic statements in an attempt at humor, bad humor, and other things like that. Going out to a cemetery to to film a fake apology video. That's right out of that's right out of the Donald Trump childish, buffoonish playbook, right? And she looked every bit of all of those things when she did it. And so this is what I say to all of those people who voted for Donald Trump in this MAGA movement. This is what these folks think about you. Joni Ernst could give a crap if you showed up at the doctor tomorrow and the doctor told you you had cancer and you couldn't afford to get the treatment. She don't care. You know why she doesn't care? Because she's on a government health care program that she ain't got to worry about it. And if it wasn't for that, most of these politicians are millionaires themselves, so they have the financial wherewithal to be able to go out and take care of health calamities. God forbid if it should affect them. But for many of these poor folks who don't have a pot to pee in, for lack of a better term, who voted for these clowns, this is how much contempt they have for you. This is how much they're laughing at you behind your back and don't give a crap about you. And they don't have any problem putting it on full display for everybody to see. And they're not ashamed about it. They're not backing down off of it. They double down. And it never ceases to amaze me. The people who support these people, how you can let them just slap you in the face and insult your intelligence on a daily basis. But I guess you hate liberals so much that you're willing to let them dog you to your face than to stand up, and call it out.
And all great points from both of you guys. Here's the other thing that gets to me is, like you said, Kevin, she's so bold with it. She's up for re-election next year. She up for re-election next year. You make a statement like this a year before you up for re-election. Like, she must know that, she's in an ironclad situation where she's going to be reelected no matter what. As long as she embraces Trump and comes out against immigrants and says she don't like DEI, like you just said, Kevin, she just told all of her constituents, I don't care if you die right now. To their face. To their face. And I'm sure many of them are just like me. I'm not even one of her constituents, and I'm through the roof with it. I can only imagine there's probably a lot of people like, nah, she can't get my vote again. But to your point, it's bewildering. There's probably a lot of people like, no big deal. She just meant a joke. I know what she meant. Huh? I know what she just said in the response to a very serious question from a constituent. I think you should take that seriously. But
Absolutely.
but like you said, they hate the liberals so much. They hate the Democrats and Obama and the immigrants and DI so much that she can reveal herself to be who she is, and they'll still accept her.
Yeah, it's like it takes me back to the whole COVID era where you saw so many of these conservatives falling out, dying unnecessarily from COVID because they wanted to believe the tripe that, you know, Trump and some other people were spitting out about it being a hoax and all of that type stuff. But lo and behold, what happened when a certain person got COVID? Oh, they got the best treatment, the new experimental drugs, everything that they were telling the average American was a hoax and it's like these people are just spitting in your face, insulting your intelligence on a daily basis, and you just swallow it. And that's why I can't help but continue to repeat the one Trump line where he says, and I hate to say this because I don't want to disparage anybody, but when he says he loves the poorly educated, I mean, because it's almost like, what else am I left to come up with when somebody can be so in your face with it and you still refuse to accept it? I mean, what conclusion am I left to draw?
When Trump said that, it was a Freudian slip. Like, he really meant it the way you just said it, right? That's really what he meant. And he does that a lot, and that, on some levels, that's part of his appeal, that he can just be so transparently human, even if it's, at first look like a negative thing. His supporters like that because it humanizes him. So it becomes a win-win no matter what. I mean, at this point, Trump can do no wrong. And it looks like people like Joni Ernst are right there with him. As long as they come out against the liberals and the Democrats and Joe Biden and DEI and immigrants and do whatever Trump says, hey, you can do whatever you want to do. Say whatever you want to say. It makes no difference. As long as you support the dear leader. That's very troubling to me. Very troubling. We'll see if she's reelected. Do you think she's going to be reelected? I mean, not knowing a lot about, the state that she's from, but just off of this, you think she'll be? Do you think this will have a impact in the election. Maybe that's a better way of saying it.
Can somebody remind me? I'm sorry. Which state she is? Is she Iowa? I
I
forget.
believe
Iowa.
it's
Yeah,
Iowa.
yeah,
Okay.
Iowa.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I was what, pretty much a red state. I mean, the chance. I don't know if she's going to have any competition or anybody challenging her in a primary, but I mean, I imagine Iowa is probably like most red states that that'll be decided in the primary. There's not some Democrat that's going to come in there in that state in all likelihood and beat her. So it'll just matter as is anybody on the Republican side going to step up and challenge her and see an opportunity based on what she said there? I don't know. We'll see.
Now, when you said that, I was thinking, she's probably so far to the right that there's no room for someone to primary her. There's no oxygen there, like, and she's got Trump. So she, like you said, red district. I mean, red state. Hey, she could do whatever as long as she doesn't, pull an Elon Musk and go after Trump. She is golden. She is good. So sad state of affairs. But let's move on. Trump directs the DOJ, White House is now directing the DOJ to investigate Biden's mental state in office. Now, Jake Tapper, who I believe is over at CNN, he's got a new book out. He's talking. I don't have it. I've seen a bunch of interviews in which he's talking about like the fact that Biden's team hid his diminishing abilities from the public. I still say that's what's going to happen with any president. Like right now, Trump's team is hiding all of his diminishing faculties and cognitive abilities or whatever shortcomings. I mean, I would expect that from anybody, but people are trying to make a big deal out of it. And to me, this story just underscores what I said before and why I supported Joe Biden and all of his pardons. It wasn't the best decision. It came with a lot of criticism. But if Biden didn't do that, the last 3 months would have been all about investigating Hunter and investigating Joe Biden's wife and all the people that he pardoned. But what do you think?
Well, I think the most troubling thing is the fact that he is even asking the Department of Justice to do anything. Because if you go back to the Watergate days, Richard Nixon was using the Justice Department and the FBI to go after his enemies. In fact, the Watergate burglary, this is true, was planned in the office of his Attorney General, John Mitchell. All those guys like Liddy and all, they were all there. That's where they planned it. And fortunately, Mitchell and Patrick Gray, who was the head of the FBI, and a bunch of others all went to prison, which gave me really reaffirmed my kind of faith in our court system and our democracy. It at that time, I believe it was Griffin Bell was the Attorney General under Jimmy Carter, and there was such a strong anger about how Nixon tried to use the Justice Department that they put policies in place at that time that basically says there is to be a complete wall between the president and the Justice Department. There is not to be any political influence by the president. And for about 50 years, there have been a few issues here and there. By and large, we've held to that. Well, those times are over. Trump put in, unlike this previous term where he had an attorney general who had at least some integrity. In fact, you might remember that after the 2020 election, Trump demanded the top Justice Department people to come out and say the election was rigged, and they refused to do it. Those guys testified at the January 6th hearings. Now, Trump's learned his lesson. He's appointed an attorney general who will do whatever he wants, who has no more integrity than he does. And so he now can tell them who to investigate. Give you some examples. One guy who I got to work with in the 2020 campaign, Miles Taylor. He's the guy who was the chief of staff of Homeland Security. He wrote that article, Anonymous, if you remember, the New York Times, then a book, basically criticizing Trump from the inside and about how dangerous he was in his policies. Didn't do anything wrong. Trump has ordered that he be investigated. He's also ordered a guy named Chris Krebs be investigated. Krebs worked for Trump as the head of election security, cybersecurity. When he was asked after the 2020 election, was it stolen? He said no. It was the safest election in history. He's now being investigated. Why? Because he told the truth. This thing is pretty much no different. What's going on? First of all, even if, which they probably did, the people around Biden, if they did hide his uh, disability, if you will, from the public, that's unethical. That's ethically wrong, but it's not against the law. What Trump is trying to do here, if you read between the lines, is he is trying to create a situation where he can get his Justice Department to file some kind of action that cancels Biden's pardons and Biden's executive orders on the premise that Biden was disabled and not able to make a sound judgment. That's what's behind this. And the whole thing is, again, we have now moved into an era where the Justice Department is no longer independent. Now the Justice Department is just a tool
Yeah.
of the president.
Yeah, I agree with pretty much everything Phil just said there. God, I can't believe I ever said that on this podcast before. Um,
Is this being taped? This thing is
This
this
is
will be
being
on
yeah,
tape,
recorded, so we
right,
got it.
Nathan?
yeah.
All right, could you just do me a favor? Could you just slice? Could you just cut out that portion and send me the link? I want to post it all
I'm
over
gonna
the
hire
One for
place.
Elon
tomorrow.
Musk. I'm
Okay.
gonna hire Elon Musk and his AI, his new AI machine to scrub it from the internet. Don't worry about it, Phil. Um, yeah, again, this is just more of Donald Trump's make them pay type strategy because there's really no benefit to this. It's a distraction at most to get people off of his failures. Whenever he finds himself in a jam, he always likes to go back and try to go after Sleepy Joe or something that's going to deflect and throw off of his failings. And I think that's what this is. And it has the byproduct of also, creating pain and issues for Joe Biden and his family and any of the other people who are associated with his administration because an investigation is not an easy thing to deal with. I mean, it's inconvenient. It's disruptive. It disrupts your life for whatever period of time that is. And Donald Trump takes
The guys I mentioned, if I can say one of them, Miles Taylor, says he's on the verge of
yeah,
like going broke just because of
yeah.
attorney's fees. Trump knows that when you target somebody, it says even if they aren't convicted, ultimately they pay a
Absolutely,
huge
and that's
price.
part of the byproduct and the sadistic joy that he's getting out of it because he again he wants to give everybody who he felt like wrongly went after him a taste of their own medicine, and if he can stick it to Joe Biden on the way, um, just as well. Here's my whole issue with the Biden mental capacity thing, and I've said this a million times on this show. There's a difference, I think, between an individual who is aged, who's getting older, and one suffering from some sort of legitimately diagnosed medical condition that says you suffer from some sort of mental capacity. So far, I have seen no evidence. I've seen nothing that anybody has presented that has proven that Joe Biden suffers from that. Yeah, the guy stumbles around, he says some stupid things. Hell, our current president does those exact same things, right? Doesn't mean he's got dementia or anything like that. So until I see that type of evidence, I'm just not going to subscribe to anything other than the fact that Joe Biden is an old man who looks, sounds, and acts his age, right? Uh, far fewer people were blessed to kind of be in Joe Biden's shape at Joe Biden's age, right? There are a whole lot of people who are younger than Joe Biden who are in much rougher mental and physical situations than Joe Biden is in right now. So I'm not one who's going to subscribe into this, oh, Biden lost his marbles narrative without proof. I mean, some people are cool with that, and some people will sit back and say, oh, you're just delusional. Can't you see? I see a very old man there. That's what I see. Now, if Joe Biden was coming out at press conferences and forgetting his name and where he was and all that type of stuff he had that bad debate performance, and I've said many times it looked bad. It looked bad, but not evidence of somebody that I would say had some form of mental, diagnosed mental deficiency. So this is just more par for the Trump or par for the course for Donald Trump. More payback, more get back, and all of the things that Phil said about what he might be trying to do to undermine Joe Biden's pardons and some of the other things. I agree with that. And if you think Joe Biden was wrong for the pardons that he did, you just wait till Donald Trump gets to the end of his term, and you're gonna see who he's gonna pardon.
Oh, you right about that.
Well, one of the most ludicrous statements I've heard, Jake Tapper said that this what he brought up is worse than Watergate. Are
Yeah,
you kidding me?
that's
Are
crazy
you
because there's
kidding
nothing
me?
criminal.
Watergate, the whole government were a bunch of criminals. Okay, so these guys, let's kind of concealed his fact that, as Kevin said, he was getting old and forgetting stuff. Oh, come on! I know you want to sell books, Jake, but
So
give
here's
us
Yeah.
a
the other
break.
thing that makes no sense about that, real quick, Nathan. Now I'm gonna let you have it. Here's
Go ahead,
what
bro.
doesn't make sense. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, Joe Biden was diminished, right? And we know it as Americans. That would not change any of the things that their administration probably did. Even if he was diminished, the same things would have been done. We weren't going to have an election in the middle of Joe Biden's term. Kamala Harris would have assumed the presidency of the United States, which, to hear Republicans tell it, would have been the worst thing, to ever happen to the United States of America. So I don't get what they're hoping this investigation is going to uncover or expose to the American people, because even if they did come out and say, "Hey, Joe Biden ain't got it no more. Kamala Harris is going to be making all the decisions. Here it goes." What were the Republicans going to do? What were Americans going to do? We weren't going to have a spot election, right? That's not how this thing works. So I don't know what they're trying to get again, other than to distract.
All good points. When I go back to, and we talked about it here, we talked about it right after here on the podcast. We was just getting started last year. And I thought that it was not Joe Biden's best performance, but I still believe that he won on the substance. I mean, yeah, he was slower and he came out like he was an older man. But when I thought about what he said and what he had actually done, and I compared it to what Trump said on that stage and what he had actually done, it was no comparison. It was no comparison. Joe Biden, in my opinion, while he was slow and he came across as older, in terms of what came out of his mouth, when he wasn't mumbling, it still made a whole lot more sense than what came out of Trump's mouth. And I thought the same thing, Kevin. I'm like, so what do you want out of this? Like, Jake Tapper has shown that he is a weak man because I
Jake
think it's
Tapper
not
is
about
selling
money.
books, bruh. He trying to
It's not
sell
a
books.
Yeah, but he could have sold books in a lot of different ways. And I think that Jake Tapper kind of succumbed to all the pressure that MAGA was putting on him. And he decided, oh, I'm gonna give you something to show you that I'm one of you. Man, it's nonsense. Worse than Watergate, and there was no crime. We're talking about a man who was already old. And that's what his staff is supposed to do. They're supposed to protect the president. Like, how does it benefit the United States internationally for the word to get out that Joe Biden is diminished? That don't benefit us. It doesn't make any sense. It's the most ludicrous thing in the world. But Jake Tapper, I hope nobody buys that trash book. And then I'll throw another one in there. And I'm so happy to see what happened with Elon and Musk because it took her story completely off the headlines. And that's the former press secretary, Jean Pierre. She got a
Mhm.
new book now. Now she's an independent. She's left the Democrat Party and she's got this new tell all book. And what I love is that the Elon Musk Trump feud has completely taken that off the headlines. I don't want to read that trash. I'm gonna read that. For what? This man gave you're the White House press secretary. Now all of a sudden you want to write a tell-all book. I get it. I'm just saying, pick a side. Pick a side. All
They
this
have
playing on the middle and trying to play both sides, pick a side and stick with it.
They have, bruh. They picked that side. We've been talking about all podcasts.
Money.
Capitalism.
Yep.
Tell all books, sell the money. Look, ain't nobody gonna buy your book if you ain't got nothing if you ain't got no tea to spill, bruh. I mean, and that's just the bottom line of it. And that's all that Pierre and Jake Tapper are trying to do is spill tea to sell some books to line their pocket. Because the fact of the matter is, now that Joe Biden's not in office anymore, you know, folk got to find a way to pay their bills, to line their pockets, and creating these books where you can be on a tour and circuit talking about it for a year or whatever it is, man. There's life in that until you can get the next political opportunity that turns around and comes your way. And that's what a lot of this stuff is, and that's how a lot of this stuff should be, received with the grain of salt. I'm not saying that there's not any truth that's contained into any of their testimonies and things of that nature, but at the end of the day, they trying to sell books, and that's what it's about.
I mean, if she's got some big something that was maybe a broken law or something like that, something that was unethical, I mean, I can see maybe, but at the same time, we living in different times, right? You got to pick a side, Democrat, Republican, or whatever you are. And she clearly was a Democrat for years, and she protected this man for years. And now you coming out saying something different. I don't think she realizes how that makes her look. Don't you? I'm looking at you. You was up to defend this man from Republicans for 4 years. Now you're writing a tell-all book. It just everything you can't capitalize off everything. I mean, have some loyalty and some dignity and some self-respect. I mean, write a cooking book or something. I don't know, but to try to play into the MAGA ecosystem and I'm a cash in there. I just don't like it. But I get Kevin, you're right. It's all about the dollars. I get it. It just leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I mean, whatever happened to loyalty? Whatever happened to keeping your mouth closed? You don't tell every secret. You and me working together on something, we fall out, I keep my mouth closed. I'm not going out there writing a book, even if I know I can, because I have integrity. You know what I'm saying? Like everything ain't for sale, in my humble opinion. But that's the reason why I'm not rich and wealthy, because I'm not willing to do anything, and I get it. But still, I mean, man, I'm looking at this like, wow, you too, Jean Pierre? Wow. So I'm glad that nobody's talking about her except for us, because everybody's talking about Trump and Elon. That's what she deserves.
Yeah. Well,
You're right.
look,
Controversy.
they'll
Yeah,
they'll
you're
find
right.
they'll find some way to dig it back up. When it when
They
it
will.
serves their purposes. She's not done. She's out of the news cycle for the time being. But stuff like this don't die. Somebody will
True.
dig it up. Fox News, somebody,
Yep.
CNN, somebody will dig it up, and they'll have her on talking about it, and it'll be back. It'll be back in the news when it's convenient. And who knows? Maybe it's when the investigation into Biden is officially launched. All of these talk programs love to have on
Yeah.
talking heads who can come in and add some perspective. So she's still gonna get some juice out of the squeeze on that, unfortunately.
No, you're right. Yeah, you're definitely right. But you think it was unethical, Phil, for the Biden administration? Like, let's say the staff was protecting him. I can only assume they are. That's what their job is. You think that's unethical? Like, if we find out the president is slipping in terms of his age or whatever, what do you think should happen? Should the staff come out and say, "Hey, everybody, our guy he ain't gonna be president no more. So let's work next 6 7 months. We just gonna keep an eye on him, but he'll still be running things, kinda." Like, what do you say in that situation?
Well, I actually think if they saw that he was slipping to a certain degree, they should have just said, "Hey, Joe, you can't run again. You're not." They should have been straight with him about that. But one thing, and I think I'm echoing kind of to some degree what you two have said, it isn't so black and white as, oh, he's capable or he's not. Uh, like Kevin was saying, he's an older man, but getting old, okay, but it isn't like, oh, he's out of it and that's it. And there's some family pride here, but when my dad was, I think, 96 years old, okay, yeah, he was clearly slipping, forgetful. But if you asked him a question about some medical thing, he'd he'd say it 100% uh, literally and articulately. And again, when my dad, he was 96 and he was living at that Dupree house, retirement home. And this was a big story, but I don't know if you know, there was a woman next to him in her 80s who was choking. He had never actually done the maneuver on a real choking person. He demonstrated life. He got up like that at age 96, did it. The food, it saved her life. And it was a kind of a cool story. And so, was he out of it then? Well, he was slipping, he was forgetful, but he certainly still had a lot on the ball, and I'd say the same thing for Biden.
Right.
Yeah,
Do you think that the age should have told America? Like, should his staff had told America, like, look, we got to be honest with you guys. He's kind of slipping, because that's what Jake Tapper is kind of saying. Like,
no.
they should have sounded the alarm and told the American public or something. Somehow it was unethical for them not to tell the American public. I don't feel that way.
No, and I don't
If he
think
was
that.
severely disabled, the right thing would have been to tell him, Joe, you got to quit and
Right.
let Kamala
I think they
take
tried
over.
that.
But no, I don't think they should have gone. Did they? I don't know.
But
I
again,
don't
here,
know. But to go and say, oh, they should have gone right to the American people, I
but
don't agree
again,
with that.
here's what we're talking about. I mean, I think the level of diminishment that you're talking about is a factor. Like if doctors have said, if the doctors looked at Joe Biden and they said Joe is in like the early stages of Alzheimer's or dementia, right? Like that type of medical diagnosis, that may be something that is worthy of reporting to the American people, to Congress, to whatever. If you've got that type of medical diagnosis, I would say that, is it criminal? No, I don't think so. Is it would it be unethical to do that? Maybe. But if you're just talking about a guy who is slowing down, who is getting older, no, you don't report that. And I don't think you're under any obligation to. And I think in fact it could be a danger to the United States to make your enemies of the country think that you've got a president who is not 100%, on the ball. We used to kind of believe in this country that we wouldn't do things like that to sort of undermine presidents and stuff when they were overseas or in different things like that, things that would give, the enemies of the country, any kind of sense that we were showing any kind of weakness or anything here. Um, but I think that that's a critical part of this conversation is what level of diminishment are you talking about that they had an obligation to report to the American people? And that's where I've stood. Anything short of some sort of medical diagnosis that says this man is in some form of early cognitive decline or in the midst of it, not even early. Any of that type of medical diagnosis, okay, I might be with you on that. But just Joe Biden getting old? Come on, man. I mean, we all saw that with our eyes. We don't need the White House to announce that. I mean, and the other thing that kind of strains credulity to me a little bit, if Joe Biden was as bad off as some people would have you believe, it's not like the president is somebody that you can hide like that, right? If he is that much diminished. I mean, look at Mitch McConnell. How many times did he freeze up in public? You can't control that kind of stuff. You can't press secretary or anything of that type of stuff. When that medical stuff hit, it hits you. I don't care where you are and what you're doing. And so, in as high profile a position as the president is in, if Joe Biden was that mentally diminished, we would have seen some freeze up moments and some other things that would have been unavoidable, right? He's the president. You can't hide him like that, And so that's where I'm at with it.
No, I think that's a smart way of looking at it, right. But you know what happens then? I can see the White House saying, "Hey, let's just not bring the doctors in. We don't want to know, right? Because if we know, then we're obligated, right? Then we're obligated to say something. So we just don't want to know. He'll be done in 4 years, or maybe he wins again. We'll just kind of push this off." But I just don't think that's. Then the Republican Party is really good at creating these narratives and pushing them out there. And this is one that, like I said, I don't know why Jake Tapper would want to play into that. But back to Kevin's point, I think it's about money. But I think it's also him succumbing to the overwhelming pressure that MAGA can put on you. Most people don't realize it's hard to even describe it. It's like the horde. It's like a swarm with a hive mindset. These people online who call themselves MAGA, they're not getting particular orders from Trump. They're just picking it up and doing what they got to do, and they will attack any and everybody.
And they're not just online.
They're in real
They're not just
life.
online.
They're in real
They're
life.
making threats to the lives of,
Yeah.
like the guy Miles Taylor I was talking about. He says that he's been getting all these violent threats to kill him. What do they call it?
Yeah.
Doxing or something like this. Or then they do the thing where they call 911 and all these police
Yeah.
cars show up. This has happened to a bunch of people that have spoken out against Trump. and it's
Here's the other
very
thing that happens
scary.
is I didn't know you knew Miles. I don't know him, but I've read a Russian interview.
We just talked together. When I was doing 2020, I was heading up the Republicans for Biden in Ohio, and we had kind of speaking stuff around the state. And there was one where he spoke with us, and then I had lunch with him. But very interesting guy, and a guy
Yeah,
with
yeah,
a lot of
white guy
principle.
and a lot of principles, and I think his story is out there. Like if you Google his name or not Google it, you YouTube his name right now, it'll come up. I mean, just like Phil said, he's being doxxed, which means they put your address out there for all these crazies. The other thing
Yeah,
is
that's it. Yeah.
somebody will send a pizza to your house, and you're like, "Who sent this pizza?" It's just a way of confirming your address so they can dox you and put you out there. They have
Right.
people, like I said,
Yeah.
MAGA have people that'll do violence to you. They'll threaten you and your family, and at the same time, they're also going to attack the system. So they got people running for city council, for school board, for the various state and local offices. I don't think people really understand what you're up against. I really don't. It's a whole nother MAGA is a whole nother universe. They got their whole other world that they live in. That's all MAGA, all conservative, and they kind of feed into themselves. I saw an interesting interview with a dude that started a new website. It's called Leaving MAGA. He was in MAGA for years. And so now he basically works to bring other people out. And I watched the interview, was talking about what was so attractive to him. They was hanging out in real life. They going to bars, they doing outings together. Like, I just don't think people realize, I'll say it again, MAGA is way more impactful, way more of a threat than people realize they are. They are way more like this. And it makes sense. We all want to feel like we're a part of something, right? We all do. We always want to feel like we're a part of something that matters. And that's what MAGA gives to them. And so when we say, why can't they just see this? Because it's so much deeper than that. It's so much deeper than just Trump. It's about people that you like and love and respect. And you feel like you're a part of a community. And that is very attractive to human beings if you don't already have that. And MAGA is not going anywhere. The name might change, but that community is not going anywhere.
Yeah, I think so. When you talk about MAGA, I mean, I think if you want to talk about sort of like the more extreme ends, where you talk about those who are capable of committing violence or going to some of the extremes that you talk about there, I mean, it's not unlike what you see with a lot of these, white supremacist groups. It's the same type of, or even terrorist networks and cells. It's the radicalization of your nation shape or form, and I've studied and looked into it different. And you're right, it's a creation of a community, but it's a community that's built on bad information, propaganda, and whatnot. And once people are immersed in that, it's very difficult to break them out of that situation. It's more than just a conversation or going back and forth.
Just lost Kevin for a second. Hey, Kev, can you hear me? Not sure what happened. Yeah, but I mean, just to pick up on your point, I don't know where you were going, but it
I can't
seemed like,
really.
yeah, your video's not up.
Okay, hold on. Let me.
All right, all good. Oh, he jumped off. Yeah, I mean, yeah, Pamela, like I watched this video. The dude it's called Leaving MAGA. If you're interested, you've got a website up, and he offers his service.
I lost you. I can't hear
Yeah,
you.
sorry about that. Yeah,
Nathan.
so it's called Leaving MAGA. And if people are interested, just go to their website. This guy, it's almost like he's looking at MAGA like it's a cult, like a lot of people say it is, and he's helping to bring people out. And I was just trying to learn. I was just trying to learn how to better communicate to MAGA and people that have that kind of viewpoint. That's what interests me in watching the video. But it's when he talks about it, I was like, wow, this MAGA's not going anywhere. It's bigger than just Republican and Trump. It's people feel like they got family. And that is very powerful. We all want family, right? We all want to feel like we have friends and people that care about us and that we care about. And MAGA is providing that. So ain't nothing breaking that.
Well, as we know, though, from times in history, I agree with you. but usually these kind of dangerous movements involve somebody at the top who's a demagogue and has the ability to push the right buttons to get those people doing what he
Oh,
Yeah.
wants.
absolutely. And Trump is that guy.
Yeah,
Um,
he unleashed it. I mean, remember, these were folks, many of them were folks who had disengaged themselves from the system. Like, they weren't involved, they weren't voting, they weren't showing up at town halls and at rallies and things of that nature. They were totally out of the electoral system. And Trump found a way to go into these parts of rural America and other places where people have been forgotten, and he's rallied them. And some of these folks had some ideologies and some ideas that traditional quote unquote established Republicans wouldn't entertain, and Trump has entertained them. And he's unlocked that, and now that horse is out of the barn. And it's all going to be awfully hard to get it back in now, because they recognize the power. This is what I always say about black folks, right? Like, these MAGA people have recognized the power that they now have when they're together, and it's gonna be hard to get them. It's gonna be hard to get them out of there now, because they recognize they got influence. You gotta listen to us now. Why? Because we show up and we vote, and we don't care how crazy you think we are. You got to respect this because we vote now. And this is what I always say. Like, if we as a collective, as black people, can ever recognize and understand that we can wield more power and influence than what we have now, if we recognize the power coming out of the shadows and utilizing that vote, you can make people listen to you. You can make them change the platform and the agenda, because much like the Republicans have come to understand with MAGA that they can't win without them, Democrats can't win without black folks. I've said that time and time again. They cannot win.
well, guys, that's all I got. I appreciate you. I know you're very busy. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to bring up? Speak now, forever hold your peace. Feels like, no, I'm out of here, man. On my Friday back. I appreciate your time, Phil. I really do. Really do.
Yeah,
Hey,
you know
Kev,
me
thank you
too
so much,
well.
sir.
Hey, thanks, guys. We'll do it again next week.
Absolutely. Yep. Have a great week,
All
everybody.
right.
I'm sorry, great
Thanks,
weekend,
guys.
everybody. Thank you. We'll be back on Tuesday.